Hello everybody, Andy here from Glass Half Dead, the #1 YouTube channel on YouTube, unless of course you are aware of any other YouTube channel on YouTube. So today I'm going to talk about something that isn't my main game, Kill Team. I'm going to talk about something called Starcraft. You might not have heard of Starcraft, but if you haven't, I'm probably not talking to you, if I'm honest with you. Starcraft is a computer game from, I'm going to say, 2001. Originally, and then they released Starcraft 2. It's a computer game. It's from Blizzard Entertainment, who many people like and know from Starcraft and Warcraft, and other games, but mainly Warcraft, let's be honest. There's a whole background between them and Warhammer, so this is kind of relevant. Of course, Starcraft is their 40k equivalent universe, and it was released a while ago, and nothing's happened with it for about a decade, really. But now, a local game studio for board games and war games has gotten the license to make board games and war games for it. And that's quite interesting and exciting. And in today's video, I want to tell you everything I managed to find out about it. So this is based on their announcement, and then they did a live stream kind of AMA Q&A thing yesterday. And I just wrote down a whole load of stuff about it, and I want to go over that with you. There you go. Just before we get to it, alternative title for this video was going to be something like, you know, a little bit clickbaity, like the craziest thing about the Starcraft war game. And it was going to be that it doesn't have base building, or and it's not like a mass battle. It seems to be skirmish level. And that's weird, right? Anyway, let's get into it, and we can talk about that once we get to that point in my slides. Let's do that. Oh, before we get to that, sorry, because I'm going to have to shrink the camera and then put it back, so that's boring. I'm going to go and talk about the miniatures themselves, because that's where we're starting, right? Because a lot of people just like models for the hobby, for the hobs. And that's great. So this is by a company called Archon Studio. I'm about to talk about them a bunch, but one of the things that I have is I actually have some of their sprues. They're going to be using the same tech, the same sprue stuff for Starcraft, the war game. They've confirmed that. So just to let you know, I have their sprues. I know their quality. There you go. These specifically are from Mantic, and if you look on the sprue, it says made in Poland, which means that it's Archon Studio. So when I talk about them very briefly, just so this is the type of sprue we're going to get. It's basically what we would call GW standard. Yeah, so I'm talking with a smidge of authority because I have the models here. Cool, but they're actually doing something. We'll get to it in a moment, sorry. Right, we'll get to it when we get to it, Andy, calm down. Okay, so let's go and shrinkify myself. Here we are, right in the corner here. So very quickly, I'm going to be doing an overview here. I'm going to talk about the minis first, because I think a lot of people just want to know, hey, can I use these miniatures in 40k? Or can I use my 40k miniatures in this game? And the answer is yes. There you go. If that's what you wanted to know, yes. Right, and they're going to talk about the basics. You know, we're talking like board size, how many models, that sort of thing. Then I just rapid fire wrote down every mechanic that they kind of mentioned, plus a few they mentioned on Discord, and then cards, because there is I don't want to say a deck building element to it, but it does seem like there might be a deck building element to it. So let's go for it. The minis, first of all. So they're 32mm. In this day and age, when you say a game is 32mm scale, that doesn't always mean what you think it means, but they did qualify that what they mean is that a Starcraft Marine is going to be the same height and size as an intercessor. So there you go. So if your question is, can I buy a Starcraft Marine and make a 40k army out of it? The answer is yes. Likewise, and it will be on a 32mm base. Likewise, if you don't want to get into a new system and buy into all of that, the rules are going to be free online, as always, as with any game apart from GW. So you could just use your 40k Marines as Terran Space Marines. So if that's your only question, you can basically play this for free if you have a 40k army, or you can go hard and buy lots of their models and put them into 40k. Cool. HIPS. It's going to be HIPS, high impact polystyrene. Is that right? Something like that. That is the type of sprue that I just showed you. I've played around with lots of HIPS. Obviously, GW is absolute standout quality. Nobody's denying that. I've also recently been doing a bunch of stuff with old Mantic stuff, which is more like Restic. The new War Machine stuff. I've had plenty of experience. I'm happy to say that the stuff I've seen out of Archon Studio so far, which in fairness is stuff from a few years ago now, is great quality. I have no issues with the durability of it, the hobby ability of it, the like how much can you stand it, etc. It is basically just GW quality. That's it. There you go. Do note, there's a weird picture behind me which I captured in a still frame that is a bit blurry. That's on me. However, when you think about GW, I think that GW really stands out with the dynamism of their poses more so than the quality of their plastic these days. Because for sure, other companies in China, in Poland, etc., have honestly matched their actual material quality. But, for example, you see this behind me here, this red thing on this grey model. So this is something that GW has never played around with. But this is something that Archon Studios does do. They mould into the model clear plastic. So you will be able to have kind of, if you know Starcraft, you have like psychic effects, if you magic, if you want to call it that. There are the Protoss who have like force fields, and their knives are made of psychic energy. And they did kind of strongly suggest that all of those knives would be in clear plastic. So if you want them to have that cool clear plastic look without being painted, you can have that, because Archon Studio has that tech, which is something GW has never expanded into, and I haven't actually seen anyone expand into really, but it's something they can do, and that is cool. It's a translucent plastic that is just molded onto the sprue along with the other grey plastic. So there you go. So that red you see above me is not painted. That's how it comes off the sprue. Something to consider. It's also made in Poland. It is made by Archon Studio. The reason I reference this is they were making a really big thing about, supporting local. Obviously, that's always good. But also, it means that a lot of other third-party games, not GW in this instance, will often, if you follow them, have long out-of-stock timings because they have to ship in parts for the game, whether it be card or box packaging or books or the plastic itself. Often everything they do is in-house. You can kind of, in that sense, think of them as a just much smaller scale GW. It's all done there, and they were boasting about their production capabilities. So if you get into the game, it should never really be out of stock. There you go. Cool. So that's the minis. There is more to say about the minis, but I've forgotten what. Hopefully, I will remember as I read through the rest of the slides. Right, the basics. So let's just quickly cover the basics of the game. So in this one, they are referencing accessibility for new players. They put themselves over on the easy to learn and slightly kind of above skirmish game. The way they've been phrasing it is combat patrol. If you're only familiar with GW, think of this as combat patrol. And there you go. So it's easier than 40k, and it has fewer miniatures than 40k. We will talk about actual miniature sizes or number of models in a moment, don't worry. But so as you can see, they've put it above Age of Sigmar in terms of number of models on the board, but significantly easier to learn. I don't think that's correct. I think this, from what they said in the stream and what I'm about to show you the rest of the game, the rest of these slides, that just sounds incorrect to me. Maybe they meant Spearhead, not full Age of Sigmar, but they never said that, so it is what it is. Cool. And then just to note, there are a lot of things that I'm about to say that remind me a lot of Star Wars X-Wing. It does seem like a few of the design decisions they've made have come from that. And I am an X-Wing stan, so that's cool. All right, moving on. So the tabletop size needed, this is of course very important. They said it's going to be 35 by 35, which is a really odd size. I'm just going to say, I don't know if that's a standard size somewhere, but it should be 36 by 36 because that's 3 by 3. I don't know why it's 35 by 35. Maybe that is a round number in Imperial, or in metric, I mean. But yeah, so it's a 3x3 board. Now, I have strong feelings about board size when it comes to skirmish games. In my opinion, a 3x3 is the absolute largest a board can be for me to consider it a skirmish. As soon as you go to 4x4, in my opinion, it's not a skirmish game. You have gone beyond. I don't care how many models are on the board. If you go to 4x4, it's not a skirmish game. 3x3 is the absolute largest size. And they say 3x3 is kitchen table. I don't know if I fully agree with that, but that's what the board size is. It's not quite as nice as, you know, GW skirmish of 22 by 30, I think, which is just that little bit smaller. So for example, I know that yes, I could play this, but I can play 40k in my house, so that's fine. I know that my local game store, Tabletop Tavern in Salisbury, cannot fit this on their regular tables. I would have to have them bring out the big tables, which then goes up to, you know, 4x6. I was like, yeah. So it's a little bit awkward for me. I don't know how other people feel about it, but it's okay. It's fine. 3x3, cool. I'm always of the opinion that although I would prefer a smaller table for practicality perspectives, if the theme and the mechanics are there to warrant this size, I will put up with the size, right? I think for me, the reason I'm going on about this is because I think if it's up against Spearhead, which is that 22 by 30 board size, and nobody plays Combat Patrol, so you should never reference Combat Patrol, but it's I suppose technically smaller than Combat Patrol, but nobody plays that, so nobody actually knows. Okay, so tabletop size needed, there you go, 3x3. We then get competitive potential. They immediately said, oh, we made something wrong in this slide. We had War Machine on the wrong side. War Machine should be on the other side. So they did say that the default way to play is competitive, although there is going to be a lot of scenarios and ways to play narrative. Cool. If we see where they've put it roughly, now I don't know how all of these games play. For example, I've never played BattleTech. I've never played Malifaux, I've never played Fallout, so I can't really talk about those. The only points of reference I have are the GW games. I know Legion a bit, I know War Machine quite well, and I know X-Wing quite well. So if we see that they've put competitive play for X-Wing all the way on the right there, and I agree, it doesn't have a narrative format at all. And we'll just ignore version 2.5 for that, obviously. So it being kind of just on the tipped to the right side of competitive play, aside from that, and the misplace of War Machine, this does seem to track with what I know roughly. I do think that ultimately, despite how much the communities lean into competitive play, Sigmar and 40k are very narrative focused games that don't have particularly tight gameplay. So them being below Legion, below War Machine, below X-Wing do make a lot of sense. Yeah, cool. Okay. So to very briefly wrap that up and expand upon it, 3x3 table, they straight up said 10 to 30 miniatures. They actually said 10 to 20 is normal, but didn't you play a list the other day that had up to 30? To which the guy said yes. So I was like, okay, cool. So it sounds like, at least to begin with, 30 miniatures is going to be your maximum number of models. Now, does that mean on the table? Does that mean on the sideboard? We'll talk about what a sideboard is in a moment. A little bit of speculation there. It's going to be using custom dice. It sounds like maybe they've just said custom dice. You're not going to be referring to any tables. You're not going to be referring to, you know, hit wounds. There are 2 dice rolls. Your hit roll, or your attack roll, their defense roll. That's it. So whether or not you hit or not is going to be based on your stats, not the enemy stats. Doesn't matter what your enemy has, you hit what you hit. Honestly, I like this. This works for me. I don't need to consult a table to know, you know, that's fine for me. I've played Age of Sigmar, which is the same, where you roll your hit, your wound, and then your enemy's defense, which has no interaction. Well, the enemy's defense does have an interaction, but unlike 40k, you don't have that back and forth of what's your hit, what's your stat, what's my stat, etc. So this is nice for me. I just like a plain hit, or not hit. So that's cool for me. Nice. We don't know much about that yet, obviously, but hey, it works. One would assume, because I've played other kind of yes-no dice games before, custom dice games, it might be something like you have yellow dice, which are the good dice, and you have white dice, which are the bad dice, and black dice, which are the medium dice, something like that. And so perhaps the regular Marine uses bad dice, but the specialist hero uses the yellow dice, and things like that. And they'll all just be pass-fail, with, you know, the bad dice having 2 successes, whereas the good dice have 5 successes, that kind of thing. Just, you know, total guess, but that would be my assumption of how a standard kind of yes-no dice game works. We then have initiative / card activations. I'm going to talk more about this in a moment, because that needs to be discussed. But it's alternating activations. Obviously, I originally wrote alternating activations, but then I remembered, Andy, there's literally no need to say that. Every game is alternating activations. You don't need to say it. It's only GW that doesn't alternate activations, because they have legacy issues with their game. So basically the way this works is you have I'll talk about the cards later. It's alternating activations, but sometimes you're going to be able to activate more, and it's also initiative based. So if you, for example, want to play a single action and you move forwards and that's it, you'll probably be able to do that first and very quickly in the game. Whereas if you want to play an uber extreme super cool card that lets you do 6 actions from the one card, well, you're going to be doing it later in the round, because because it's very powerful. So naturally you get to do it later. And they said that the game time is going to be about 2 hours. They said 1.5 to 2 hours. You know, game time's always a weird thing. Game time is going to be based very heavily on how easy the system is to pick up and learn. I would say that if they're doing a simple yes-no dice system and then initiative card activations, I imagine this would be around the time. If they were saying, oh, it's a lunchtime game, it'll take you an hour tops, I'd say, guys, I've heard so many people say that. 2 hours as a game time sounds like I would hope that is kind of your max after you understand the game concepts. I don't want to be moving around 10 models for longer than 2 hours, that's for sure. So, fingers crossed, 2 hours is the max. Right. They're going to release a 2-player starter set. It's going to be Zerg versus Terran. And all terrain in the game, they have said, is going to be pre-painted. At the same time as releasing this, they are going to release the Protoss, but the Protoss won't be in the starter set. But you will be able to buy a single box that is the Protoss. These are all going to be starter set purchases. So there is an implication that there will be more than just the models in there. You will get, presumably, dice, cards, your activation deck, all these things. We don't exactly know what the offering is yet, etc, etc. They've said that each thing will have 4 squads, whether that is you know, Marines, Medics, Hellbats, and then a hero, or if the hero's in addition, we don't know. It's 4 squads. We also don't know squad sizes. Of course, we're going to kind of have to guess. Total guess, if we're looking at how many models are on the table, presumably Protoss, who are your elite guys, are going to be squads of 3 max, which would then track, so you get 4 squads, which would be, you know, 3 dudes, 3 dudes, 3 dudes, a hero. And that's your minimum squad army size in the game. So that would kind of make sense if it's 3s. But yeah, cool. They said that the co-op mode is being worked on. Sorry, they first said we're not doing a solo mode. They then said we are doing a co-op mode and it will be against AI, which means you can play solo too. There you go. There you go. If there's an AI, you can play solo, but obviously that would be designed around playing co-op, because in case you don't know, the Starcraft computer game did have a strong focus, Starcraft 2, on co-op. Oh, brief aside. Some people were asking, is this based on Starcraft 1 or Starcraft 2? They said Starcraft 2, because that's where we have much better references from. Although they aren't limited to only Starcraft 2. Apparently they have access to the whole of Starcraft canon that they can draw from. They can't create anything new, that's how licensing works, but there you go. They expect the price per model, that's the key, per model to be 30% cheaper than Games Workshop. So, there you go. But as we've also seen, the actual number of models on the board is not 40k scale, is it? So, if you think of a combat patrol, that gets you, what, 20 models? And that's £100. We would expect, therefore, for 20 models to cost us about £70. Once you go retail, you can probably get 10% off that. So you're looking £60 maybe. And in fact, I say exactly that below. I say expect around £75 for the starter set. So all I did here is basically Archon Studios already has multiple games out for different game systems. One of the things they have, there's a large starter set, which is for one of their, I think it's the Heroes of the Universe, Masters of the Universe. I'm not into that IP, I don't care about it. And it is £75, and that seems to be the start of a big board game type thing. So I would assume it is £75, which is then reduced on Wayland Games to, I think it's 65. So there you go. Cool. So we would assume that your 2-player starter would be £75. And will contain 20 models plus terrain plus stuff, which for me is very acceptable. Hey, everyone is different when it comes to money. So I don't want to say what is and isn't acceptable, but hey, if that's a self-contained game, 75 quid with terrain, with mat, with dice, with everything you need to play, I wouldn't complain about that. So there you go. Let's talk about mechanics. So at this point, I just rapid fire wrote down everything that I thought was interesting as they said things. So this is in no particular order. This is just for people that didn't want to watch the AMA. So you're activating a unit, not a model. So when you draw your card and it says something, which we'll talk about when we get to the card section, like you can perform 2 actions, move and shoot. You get to activate your 3 models if it's a 3 model squad, or 5 models if it's Zerg, or 1 model if it's a hero. Who knows? Again, I am wildly speculating when I say these things, just as an example. You activate all 3 of those models, so it is a unit activation game, not a model activation game. You're going to be measuring, I put rules measurement. What I meant was ruler measurement, not hexes. It is a war game, not a board game. You will need a ruler. There you go. Unfortunately, they're not using shapes. You know I love a good shape measurement. It is what it is. It's fine. They are working on push fit models. I realize this is not a mechanic. This is where I wrote it down. This is where they answered it. So they are hoping to provide, obviously. So it is as I showed you, a hips. It's going to be a hips game. It is a hobby. You will need to build and paint your models. However, terrain will be pre-painted and presumably pre-assembled. Maybe not actually. Don't know. I don't know how their pre-painted stuff works, to be honest. I have seen it. I saw Archon Studios at at Salute 2024, and sure enough, their Prismacast, that's what they call their pre-painted terrain, looks amazing. So that's very exciting. But I don't actually know how it is provided to you. So they are hoping to provide push-fit models, but that is not yet confirmed. Is what it is. Co-op against AI, again, they said no solo, but then they said there will be co-op against AI, therefore you can play solo if you want. They said the list building will be supported by an app. However, there will be data cards on the table. Oh, I should probably say now. I should have said this right at the beginning. All of this is subject to change. Nothing here is firm. There's also, this is me interpreting what they said. So I don't know 100% if, firstly, what they said is correct because they changed it in the middle of design, or if I understood what they said. So, at first they were like, oh yes, kind of very offhand, list building will be in an app. Moving on, that's all they said. And then they answered one of my questions, luckily, which was, are you playing with, like, what is the media you have in front of you? And they said, we don't want you, you do not need to have an app to play the game. And they were very firm on that. You know, the guy was like, you know, if you needed that, just go and play the computer game. We want you to, there will be data cards on the table, because you need to know, you know, how many attack dice to roll and what, and stuff like that. And that is something we're going to give you at the table. And they said that so firmly that it made me think, oh, maybe there won't be an app. So I'm not quite sure there. So there's no setup phase, which is interesting. So you put down your terrain, and then you start playing. There is no deployment phase. Fog of War is a thing. We don't exactly know what... Well, from the no setup phase, we can understand a few things. Firstly, Fog of War is kind of simulated as you have a... Fog of War, by the way, sorry, is what you get in real-time strategy games, where if you're looking at your map, you can't actually see the entire map and see everything happening in real time. You only get a small cone of vision around where you actually have units. They are simulating this, and I think that the map itself that you'll be playing on, your 3x3 board, is your cone of vision supplied by your units. So the Fog of War will be simulated in the sense that you can then deploy your units not necessarily just in your deployment zone, right? At a total guess, I would imagine round 1 and 2, you must deploy your table edge, you know, with one model in the unit touching your table edge, everything else in coherency, something like that. And then as the rounds go on, and we'll talk about the rounds going on in a moment, you can deploy on your half of the board, and then you can deploy any side of the board, something like, you know, something like that, right? So there's no deployment phase, no setup phase. Once the train's down, you begin, and first activation is walking onto the board, essentially, with one unit, that kind of thing. Cool. We don't know, again, to clarify, I'm really extrapolating a lot from what they said about how Fog of War and about how most of this works. This might be incorrect. Okay. So list building is point-based. They said that they tried to make things work. So like you buy your units with crystals, and then you buy your upgrades with Vespene. These are resources from the computer game, to clarify. So they tried to add some of that theme in there. That did not work. Hopefully, so they said it was too complicated for what they were going for. Hopefully, they will still keep in that little nugget of technically it's not a point. You are paying your crystal, your gas, whatever they want to call it. But it is just a very straight, simple point system. Zerg get creep tokens. So if you're Zerg, you can put down a token, and that is where your creep extends to. And there you go. That's cool. However, they don't like tokens. So much like the lead guy there was very adamant that he didn't want you to have to play with an app. He was very adamant that he did not like tokens. So the tokens, firstly, are going to be plastic. They're not going to be cardboard tokens. I assume that's because they have better plastic manufacturing in-house than they do card manufacturing. And they're confident with their plastic and their hips, and they're not confident with their card, which is fair. Or they have to get card from another company, you know, something like that. But yeah, he said that he was walking around and he just didn't like seeing tokens all over boards. So don't expect many tokens in this game. There you go. They said there's basically no rerolls. I think their exact words were... so basically somebody said, you know, 40k is a game of rerolls, let's be honest. And as someone that has played 40k, it bloody well is. Likewise, Kill Team, heavy on rerolls at the moment. It's very GW to everything have rerolls, and it makes sense because rerolls are statistically the best thing you can have in the game, which is great. But they said basically no rerolls. If something does have it, it will be a very special ability, or I think they said one faction gets rerolls, or like one unit has a reroll. But that's it. So don't expect it to be an endlessly re-rolling game, which is good. Although, as we've seen, they've already cut down on number of rolls required. It's going to be hit roll or attack roll, defense roll. That's it. Done. App not required to play the game. Already covered that. Heroes are not leaders or mandatory. Hey, if you don't want to play with Kerrigan, Queen of Blades, or... oh gosh, I can't remember the Protoss guy's name. Or, you know, Jim Raynor. you don't have to. They also said that ultimately these heroes will come out in multiple formats. So Jim Raynor from StarCraft 2 is just a Marine, but Jim Raynor from StarCraft 1 is on a Vulture. They said that eventually that you will get both of those models out there, so that's cool. Oh, do I say this? I'd probably say this somewhere else, but they did say that there's going to be vehicles, there's going to be a siege tank. They also said there's going to be a Colossal, which, in case you're aware, is a massive unit. But they're not going as big as flying units, so they're not going to have a battleship, for example. Oh, there was something else about that, but I forgot it. There you go. And it's proxyable for 40k, which luckily I already covered at the beginning, so we don't need to talk about that again. He went off on a random tangent about how PVC models, so, you know, why hips? And basically he said that PVC models, which is your standard kind of styrene that you would expect from a board game level quality model, kind of can't be made in the EU due to health and safety laws. So anything doing PVC models tends to come from China. And so they will not be doing PVC models. They will be full hips. There you go. Implying that is for the board game stuff as well. I probably should have said a release date. It's too late now. This is releasing in 2026. There you go. Great. Attachments are activated separately. I don't know if that's the correct word, but basically unit attachments. So I imagine this means heroes, or in the game, you can often upgrade a unit. I don't know. Oh man, it's been so long since I've played StarCraft. But when you're activating a unit, even if you have an attachment model that buffs just that unit, it will still be a separate activation. That doesn't mean much to us at the moment, but they said that, so. The wargame will not be using the same models as the board games. That's something that's very important to know. They are going to be completely separate. So, perhaps, I think on the one hand this is good. However, because it means that the board game and the wargame don't have to intermingle, and they can be entirely separate, good quality games, not constrained by each other. But I feel like it would be a big misstep to not do at least one tie-in where it's like, hey, we've done a board game and it is using additional models that can be used in the war game. Yeah, that just seems like a bit of a shame. Yeah, there you go. It would just be nice to have things that kind of cross that divide. I'm not saying they all should, and obviously it should be a good game in its own right first, but if I've already got all the war game models, let me use them in the board game. Random one. StarCraft Ghost is not canon as it was never released, and therefore they, as a licensee, they are not allowed to use it. So there will be no StarCraft Ghost artwork used for models here. They have to use official canon. Ghost isn't canon. When it comes to list building, we obviously don't know much. However, you can run skew lists, because they kind of offhandedly said that this guy ran like all Raveners, I think. Or Ravagers? All Ravagers, not Raveners. That's Warhammer. That's Tyranids. So obviously you can, if you want, just run a bunch of huge models. They might not be good, but you can therefore get that level of list building, where if you want to run all big dudes or all small dudes, you can. It is a classic war game. There are no buildings. Again, as I said at the start, this is a choice to have StarCraft and not have base building. In my opinion, bit of a miss. Is what it is. No base building and not mass battle, so you can produce units, is a very strange option. It feels a little bit, if I may critique it there, that choice, that I feel like that is a choice out of practicality, which is a good choice to make. But it's kind of like they just took a rule set that hopefully is a good rule set and said, yeah, let's just give this a StarCraft skin, as opposed to saying, this is StarCraft, let's make StarCraft on the table, you know? Although, you know, launching a full-size war game is outrageous, so I do understand that they probably want to leave the simulation of StarCraft to a board game. You gain resources as the game goes on. This allows you to bring in more units in later turns. So as models die, they can be brought back onto the board, it seems. And for example, turn 1, maybe you can bring on one model or one unit, one squad onto the board. But then by turn 10, you have the ability to, or you know, turn 1 you can move one model onto the board, and that all you can do is move it. Turn 10 you can bring on 5 models, and they can all perform 3 actions each, right? So you will gain those supply tokens, those supply resources as the game continues. So it will escalate quite heavily, which is cool. We're still going. So we get to the card system now. Again, a lot of this is kind of speculation from me based on what they said, both in the stream and in Discord later. So it has a card activation system. These cards will be included in the boxes. However, they are not yet sure how they are going to restrict these cards. So for example, my big question is, let's say I'm a Zerg main. That's all I want to play and that's all I want to buy. Am I going to have to go and buy the Protoss starter set because they have a really good activation card which can be used for me but is only sold in the Protoss or Terran sets? We don't know. They haven't answered. There you go. Is what it is. To me right now, I feel like I can happily say it would be insane. It would be crazy for them to do that, because other game systems like Warhammer Underworld, like Fantasy Flight Games, have done that in the past and come under very heavy critique for it. However, you also have to remember that games tend to be kind of... You've got to have the community on your side, of course, but most games do seem to be funded mainly by whales who will buy everything. And so they don't really care, and they're going to buy it anyway. So they don't really mind, and they're your biggest customers. So we don't know what they're going to do here. It might be a case of hunting it all. But one thing we are sure of is it's not a TCG. If you buy a pack of models that come with cards, it will be that same 10 cards or however many in every pack. You're not having to try and actually find the right card, because each box of units comes with a booster pack of random cards. But if it did do that, that would be insane, and we could immediately say, let's not buy this game. But they're not doing that, because that would be insane, so it's fine. Deck building is included, so you get to pick your army, and you also then get to build your deck. So, for example, let's say you're taking Marines. It's not like the Marines are locked to the same 5 cards. And if you then just take 5 squads of Marines, you then get 5 squads of the 5 lots of the same 5 cards that they can take. Nope. You get to... All of the cards are universal, or some of the cards are universal. I assume some are faction locked as well. We don't really know at this point. It would obviously be silly for the Protoss to get a Zerg creep card, right? That increases your creep. Well, why would you put that? Why would a Protoss ever take that, right? So, again, we don't know the specifics of this, but it's interesting. So there will be deck building. The only thing we know about cards so far is that the player starts with 5 in their hand. That's all we know. We don't know deck size, we don't know if there's a limit, if there's a minimum or a maximum, we don't know if they cycle, we don't know if they don't cycle, etc. Action cards are universal, there you go. So a card will have an action point, an initiative number, and then ability/boosts. So action points, it seems like each card will allow you to perform a certain number of actions. It will then have an initiative number, the initiative being when in the draw you get to pick that. And then it will, additionally to the action points, allow you to boost your models or perform a specific ability. So as a total random example, a low level card might have 1 action point, but because it's very low in that, its initiative number will also be 1, so you will be able to play that immediately. Okay? Oh, the way it works, by the way, is the initiative number defines when you do it. So my understanding of the turn structure, very roughly, is you have a draw phase where you would say, I am playing this card this turn. Whoever of the two of you has the initiative, has the lower initiative or higher initiative, doesn't matter, has the lower initiative gets to do their card first. Hence why a 1 action point card doesn't let you do much, so it would have a low initiative number, so you get to do it first. Whereas you could have a card that lets you have 4 action points, but that will then have a high initiative number, so the enemy will get to do their thing before you. There you go. And then the abilities and boosts, so the cards don't have to have this, but you might have a card, for example, that has action points 2. We can assume that's a standard card, as it will allow you to spend 2 action points for your turn. Initiative number 2, so if the enemy's doing something very quickly and fast, like a single action point move, they will get to do that first, otherwise they'll do it after you. And then you might have an ability like +1 attack dice, +1 defense dice, whatever. There you go, and that would be your boost, and then an ability might be, who knows, remove fog of war, something like that, right? This card system functions as your APM. APM is a computer game term called actions per minute. It's a whole thing. I won't explain that. If you know what it is, it's kind of trying to simulate the idea that you can do lots of stuff really quickly in one area, or you can have a lower APM and spread it out over your entire army. There you go. They also mentioned over in Discord that there is a fatigue system. The fatigue system, again, they haven't said much here, is going to allow you to react to enemy things live. And then when you draw your card and that card gives you an action point to spend, the fatigue system kicks in and says, well, you reacted with me, so you have to spend one of your action points on me immediately. So you get to react, but we don't quite know to what level. Does a reaction mean Overwatch? You move in my area and I get to shoot you? Is that it? We don't know. We don't know. There you go. And that is it. And this has been a long video. So I'm just going to wrap it up immediately right here at the end. Long story short, I have, I'm a Blizzard fanboy, always have been, more into Warcraft than Starcraft, but ultimately, if Blizzard hadn't kept me going through the long, cold, lonely years of me not actually wanting to play war games and only wanting to play computer games, I probably would have dropped off from Warhammer Games Workshop long ago. For sure, ages ago, I was a Warcraft 3 stan, Warcraft 2 actually, to be fair, but that's not the point. Who cares? And I enjoyed Starcraft 1 and 2. They were formative in my growing up years. And the fact that they are finally coming over to wargaming is a really cool idea. So I'm definitely watching this with interest, and it's too early to say, but it does seem like they have a lot of interesting mechanics here. And although it would be awesome to have the visual of having a full-scale mass battle, 100 units of StarCraft 2 models running across a really cool terrain like Terran base or Zerg base or whatever, full of creep and everything, I think actually, in reality, from a more practical perspective, I'd probably never play that game because I'd never finish painting it. And this scale of game is actually the type of game I enjoy anyway. I'm much more a skirmish player. I feel like 20 models is skirmish, so we'll see how that actually plays. And from a practical perspective, it sounds like this has a lot more mechanics in it that I actually like, as opposed to me enjoying the spectacle and playing a game because of the spectacle. There you go. So I'm watching out for this, but nothing happens now until 2026, so see you in a year, I guess. Have a good one, everybody. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think.